What is up, everybody, and welcome back here to the Deborah YouTube channel. We got a fun one today. I'm talking strategy. Now, I don't talk strategy a ton, but I love when I do it because I think it gives it a little bit more nuance. How do you build your rosters out there? So we're talking about how you build a dynasty team that sustains itself, right? Not just for a one-year kind of title run and then some guy leaves the league, but how can you kind of really retool and remaster your roster over time, but stay contending? So I'm going to talk about a bunch of principles today that you kind of want to live by. Even if you are a seasoned manager in Dynasty, I give you some resources that you may not know about that will help you along the way. So let's dive into those strategies and those principles that I like to follow. So the first one, and a lot of people, if you play Dynasty long enough, this is a pretty common one, but I do like to mention it because there's some nuance to it. You generally want to build around elite quarterbacks and superflex and wide receivers. Now, there's reasons for this, right? One, the running back shelf life is not very long. There's a steep drop. Now, it's not to do to age. We've seen guys like Saquon Barkley, CMC, even Josh Jacobs to an extent, Joe Mixon, those type of running backs we've seen. If they get volume and they're in their offense and their scheme, they can win you leagues, right? The question is, and always why the shelf lives are so short, is injuries, right? One running back injury at a position that's volatile will destroy that player's value. Look at Jonathan Brooks, just tore his second ACL, hasn't really played that much. I mean, he went from running back 12, 13 before that second ACL injury to now he's plummeting down to the 30s, 40s. Many people are not drafting him, right? People invested some high capital in him, and now it's gone. So the running back shelf life is very volatile. So they say, hey, build through that wide receiver. And when you look at that, there's less fluctuation among wide receivers. When you look at the top wide receivers year in, year out, based on dynasty value, maybe not finishes, right? That's why we're going to get into running backs on the next principle. Like you can pretty much expect CD, Chase, Jefferson. Those guys are mainstays. Puka, Amon-Ra St. Brown, like those guys continually stay there. And then every once in a while, you get a Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr., one of those rookies that pops up, right? That kind of sustains themselves too. But really the top of the wide receiver market for 3, 4, 5 years, it tends to stay the same. And it's really about value, right? You always have those players that have those spike years that they've become top 5 guys, a Tyreek Hill for most of those years. Like you're going to have those spike guys, but the value tends to stay the same, right? Your value is there for those guys. That's why when you build through wide receivers and quarterbacks, they tend to hold it for the most part, right? And if they get injured, even wide receivers that get injured, they bounce back quicker. And not even that, they retain their dynasty value, right? So you want to invest in those cornerstone wide receivers first. Then you get your quarterbacks, or you get your quarterbacks first, then wide receivers. And really, it's all about value. Remember, you're trying to accumulate value, keep value. That allows you to retool. That's the other thing. If you invest in a ton of running backs, but they get injured and the value drops, it's hard to retool your roster and get elite pieces. Now, instead of buying quarters, you're buying nickels, right? Nickel assets out there trying to dime and play that way, and it just doesn't work there. So a general rule is you want to prioritize young, productive wide receivers to build that stable core. That consistency and longevity will keep you kind of in contention, right? There's moves you have to make that you can't just bank on that. You're going to miss on some of the young guys. But if you can kind of have that stable core, those 2 or 3 great wide receivers, you're going to have a longer shelf life of contending. And that's the whole goal here. Contend and win your leagues. Now, the second principle, because I don't want to give up just the running backs, you got to know when to buy running backs. So you need to have a legitimate running backs on your roster that has volume, that's getting that volume there to win leagues. You can't just win through wide receivers, right? You're going to need that. They're crucial, but you need to know when to build them, and you need to have your roster in place, right? You have your elite wide receivers, you have your solid quarterbacks out there, and that's when you go and look and say, okay, this team's ready to contend. Here's what it needs. So number one thing I try to do is focus on undervalued veterans, right? So I write about this. I talk about it. I go through all of, rankings. We're going to talk about like ADP and where that goes. But who are some guys year in, year out that you can just steal, right? Example, before this last year, I could have bought Derrick Henry for a second. I did buy Derrick Henry for a second. Then he goes to the Ravens and has an all-career year again. That's the type of guys that will win you leagues. Another example of a guy that's going late right now, 8th, 9th, 10th round ADP, Alvin Kamara for the Saints. When you're looking at expected fantasy points per game, he's a top 5 running back. That's a guy to go grab. So when focus on those undervalued veterans. You can churn those guys, and because of the age just bias out there. You can grab those guys for pretty cheap. Think of what Joe Mixon. Remember when Joe Mixon was going to get cut from the Bengals? Then he didn't get cut for the Bengals and turned in a top 12 performance. Then went to Houston and everybody said he was dead. And then he kept just churning in those top 12. That's the guys that you target, right? Those are the guys that you're going to go after that have value. Another one to think about, Ramondre Stevenson for New England. Not sexy, not exciting, not a guy that's like, yeah, he's going to get that volume and we're sure of it, but he's cheap. And those are guys that definitely, especially because the position fluctuates so much, that you're cheap enough to fill in on a very stable roster that gives you enough expected fantasy points and in real fantasy points to win your leagues. And then just follow the value, right? Don't pay up for a running back. Don't ever move a dynasty cornerstone wide receiver for a running back. That is not the way to win, and that is not the way to kind of manage your roster. And then understand the market in your particular league. Understand who values what, right? Understand that, hey, do you have some managers out there that are just, they hate running backs. They want to get any running back off the board, right? A James Conner type, a Josh Jacobs type, and you can get them for cheap, then do it, right? Secure your wide receivers and quarterbacks, but look at the veterans and understand too, like with the market right now, everybody is touting the 2025 class to be deep. I'm part of the problem. It is deep. That doesn't mean these veterans are just going to go die off the roster, right? And because everybody thinks the 2025 class of running backs is so deep, the veterans are going to be even cheaper. Now, buying them sometimes comes with risk, especially before the draft, right? But that is when some of the best prices can go. And sometimes you got to be a little risk. Got to be risk takers here. You have some multiple seconds. Maybe you got picked up in deals. Like, these are the ways to kind of go. So knowing when to buy those running backs, where to buy them, and kind of when those value peaks and valleys are, that's extremely important. Now, the next principle that you have to kind of live by, future first equals flexibility, okay? I'm not saying that you can never sell your first, right? There's always opportunities to sell your first and knowing when to do it, but it just provides flexibility, okay? So that's the ultimate currency. Even if they're not good first, they're late first. It doesn't matter, because every general manager, I said general manager because every manager thinks they are one. They think they can use that first and turn their team around, right? There's immense value in holding a lottery ticket for the next big thing, right? So even if, and you can use those picks, that's fine. And maybe you have it, but they're top tier trade assets. You know, when you go through it and you say, hey, I have multiple firsts in these rounds and understand when they are, then use that to your advantage. Okay. Like, hey, I know I need that wide receiver. This team's aging. They built through their running backs. They're off the board. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I know I can give them a couple firsts for him. Then you go get a legit cornerstone wide receiver that way, and understanding when that goes, right? So like I always show this chart out here, and this is basically the cycle of pick player value. It's incredible. But right now we're sitting in Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl areas, and picks are getting, they're at that 3 or 4 range of expensive because everybody's going to find their guy. Senior Bowl is the perfect time to start building up that hype for some of these guys. Then the combine comes, right? You're thinking Brashard Smith, some of these guys that we've been talking about on this channel for a long time. People are starting to understand who they are, and now they're like, oh man, I can go get this kid in the second round, third round. It doesn't just make your first valuable. It also makes your second and thirds more valuable, especially with the narrative how deep the class is at the running back position. The other thing too is understanding which draft classes to invest in, right? So for us, we've done a couple of videos on this, in terms of what's coming next down the pipeline. But the one class that's going to have a ton of value is the 27 class, right? Arch Manning should be in the 26 class, and a lot of people are going to buy into that. They're going to love him, but he could still come out in 27 class. But guys like Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, Cam Coleman, DJ Lagway, some of the running backs are going to pop off. We haven't really seen a lot of those yet. Nate Frazier from Georgia. So there's a lot of guys in the 27 class. Dylan Raiola. Remember, you don't have to use the picks on them. You just have to have people that want those guys. And like a guy like Jeremiah Smith, they're going to love this kid. Many are already talking about him being a top 5 pick in rookie drafts this year if he was to come out. And if people want those picks, they're going to give you a premium asset. As in the past, maybe 2 years out was cheaper to buy those picks, but knowing what's coming down the pipeline can help. Now, if you want to accumulate those and be more flexible that way, absolutely. That's kind of the move. But you always got to understand the market. A lot of people get the same advice from a lot of different areas, right? A lot of different content creators or websites or whatever. And they're telling you to invest in the 27 class because of how deep it is, how great it is. Well, then use that to your advantage. Go sell those picks for ransom, get some legitimate cornerstone pieces, and go win your league. So those guys that are always trying to rebuild and retool, they're not going to win it with those picks right now. You're going to win it. And then it still provides flexibility because you're getting cornerstone pieces, right? If you're going to trade first, don't trade them for those assets that are going to be declining. Like, I advocate not giving up a first for a running back. If you can go find a veteran running back like a James Conner for a late second or any type of thing, use that capital there, right? If I'm moving a first, it's because I need a quarterback or a wide receiver, or it's tight end premium and I can get a top 3 guy, right? You understand kind of the value of first and where they go from. Next one here, when we're talking about don't fill the needs in the offseason. You have no needs right now, right? If we're sitting here and you're looking at your roster and looking like, oh, gotta start 3 running backs, man, get out of here with that. No, you don't. You don't got to start anybody right now. So number one thing in the offseason, is accumulate value. You're not trying to fill anything yet. It doesn't matter, right? You're just going to accumulate value and stay flexible on that value. If people are selling off some tight ends and you're in tight end premium, just accumulate as many as you can, right? You don't have to look at it from just a position-based need. You look at it from a value-based need. Hey, I can grab these guys, put them on my roster. Once they're on my roster, I can move them off later, right? Your job is just to accumulate as much as you can. And I always advocate knowing your league mates, looking and seeing who they didn't get off the waiver wire. If you can acquire them now, if your waiver wire is open, those are the times to do that. Scoop up those stashes, go get them. Like, hey, those guys that are kind of on there, I did a stash video on this channel a while ago. Look at the rosters, go through the depth chart, and just kind of go through it and say, okay, who are some guys that I think could have that next shot? For example, the Rams, there's a lot of noise about Puka Nacua maybe not coming back. Maybe some people you want to go stash Jordan Whittington or whoever. Get those guys on your roster. They're pretty much free. Go grab them, place them there. If they open up rosters in the offseason in your league, then you have stashes that continually could break out, and then you can ship them, right? I wouldn't advocate just keeping them there. Then you can move them and provides that flexibility. Look for breakouts, understanding when those come. Like, be aggressive too, like on the trade market. Anticipate some value drops that could happen out there. These are all things to do. Like, you're not filling those needs, right? You're looking for breakouts. Okay, who's going to value could really drop out? And a lot of people are going to look to running backs, but I do think wide receivers too. Like, hey, go through the coaching changes. Go look. I just wrote an article about Ben Johnson going to Chicago, some guys I really like. Now, that's a positive move, but I even highlighted the running back position saying, hey, the guys that he may want on that roster, or that you want, that he wants there, aren't there yet. A Swift, a Johnson, he doesn't want those guys. So maybe we anticipate moving Swift prior. He gets the Ben Johnson bump now. You can move off of him, maybe re-roll into a second, late first. Probably not getting a first there, but like a re-roll second. Then maybe you get that running back that he drafts, right? So understanding where that value drops are or the peak is, anticipate that, and then fill that value, not need. So the way you have to look at the offseason, it's a value-based build, not a need-based build. Not yet. You can do that later, right? When you start prioritizing into August, late July, August, looking at your roster. But we've all been there. We're sitting there in August, training camp start, and then my dude that I was expecting tears his ACL, right? And you're like, damn it. If I would have shipped him off when I had the chance, I thought that was going to be my guy. Obviously, it can't happen all the time, but that's when you start filling needs in that range, right? You don't have to fill them too early. You're just value. Now, how do you do this? Well, one great resource is Dynasty Daddy. I talk about it a lot. This is one of my teams. There's a screenshot from a few weeks ago. So you can tell here what it does. It's going to show you kind of where you rank along the league, right? So my QB rank, I got Love and Kyler Murray. Not amazing there. Wide receiver rank is at wide receiver 2 with some guys that have been injured. This team got banged up throughout the year. Running back, I'm at 4. Tight end at 5. So I'm okay. I'm at a very average team here. So for me, when I'm looking at this roster, I'm looking, okay, I don't really need needs right now. I know I'm pretty good across the board, but I don't really have those elite assets on this roster that I really want. So how can I pivot off of this? So this sets me up. Now, what the nice thing about Dynasty Daddy is it gives you every other team in that league too. So you can kind of look and navigate their rosters as well and say, hey, what does this guy need? What is this one of those things? Where does his assets need? See, I have 2 first here. Maybe this team is rebuilding. It'll tell you it's rebuilding. Maybe I can pivot off a couple of those first and another asset to go get a legitimate playmaker, a cornerstone guy, a wide receiver out there to kind of build through. So those are what you're looking for when you're thinking of, okay, I don't want needs right now. where's my value? What's the most important, right? If I look at this roster, my running back value, it's going to be tanking soon, right? You think of Trey, Najee, Rashad. I was going for it this year. However, some injuries happened, so I was able to get a first back this year because I realized my landscape was not great. So I'm retooling there, and it provides me some more flexibility. Now, the next principle here, the rookie drafts are coming, and to me, first round to me is always about best player available, right? I'm not so much worried about landing spots in that first round. Talent always takes precedence over immediate team need for me. For example, last year when I was at my previous company that shall not be named, I advocated, draft Brock Bowers at whatever the hell ADP you got in your rookie drafts, right? I was big on that. We wrote the rookie guide. I said, hey, draft this kid. He is special, right? We got the receipts because it's a whole damn guide. And then it turns out he's already Dynasty tight end 1. I drafted him based on my evaluation. I'm going to stick with that. I love the spot for him because he could be the number 1 target getter on that roster, and I believed in his talent. So to me, I'm always about best player available, right? Now, there's caveats to that. There's, hey, I need that quarterback. I'm struggling. And in a league that I did, just, as transparent as possible, I tried to be on this channel. I needed a quarterback in one of my leagues, so I drafted Bo Nix at 109. It was disgusting. I hated it, but hell, it worked out, right? Sometimes it just works out. Sometimes you're sitting there and, you contend for the playoffs now with Bo Nix as my quarterback. I didn't expect that, but I really, really need that quarterback because of my league scoring and settings. That's a little different, but to me, if it comes down to like, hey, best player available or team need outside of maybe that quarterback position, I'm taking the best player available, right? And I'm going to roll with it. Now, when you look into the second round, it comes a little bit nuanced, right? First round wide receivers offer elite upside usually, but when second rounds come around, it's really the running back zone. Like what we're starting to see right now is the market kind of undervalues those second tier rookie running backs, or like even last year, those are the first running backs taken was in the second round. So understanding drafting potential volume is important for those second round. So I tend to look in the second round as my running back zone, right? Unless it's an elite guy, a guy like Trayvon Henderson this year, Ashton Genty, those guys. Now, I just talked about it in my build, right? If my build's not ready for a running back, I'm not drafting a running back. I will trade back, collect some assets, and then take one in the second round if I need to. But that's really where I at. And I really advocate just follow the touches. Follow the volume with those guys. Understand that and trust your evaluations. Stick to your evaluations, right? Don't let someone knock you off that perch of like, hey, that's my guy. I'm going to draft this guy. Oh, wait, so-and-so from this, website was telling me not to. No, stick to it. Stick to your guns and trust what you saw there and go through it. That's what's led to me to have a lot of guys like Brock Bowers on my roster because I believed in them. I believed in their talent. Brian Thomas Jr., those type of guys. Hey, I'm going to draft these guys best players, right? Xavier Worthy was a big one for me, late first, early second last year of like, I believe in the talent. And I still do. I think Xavier Worthy is going to have a great role there in Kansas City. And I think many of you are worried about Rashee Rice, but I think Worthy's better in the role that they have for him right now. So I think Rashee's going to get pushed out of that role into something else, which is good, right? For me as a Worthy owner there. So that's just kind of giving you examples for that principle of like, hey, best player available in that first round. Second round is kind of that running back zone. Third and fourth, that's just to pick your poison. Go after whichever you do. I tend to go after, running backs as well. I'll take a shot on wide receivers, but when you look at the historical hit rates of wide receivers in the third and fourth round, it's nasty, right? It's nasty there. Now, next Dynasty principle here that I like is tier-based focused trading. So really what this all is honestly, understanding trade markets and mastering the art of trading it's difficult. Like that is really, I see a lot of hubris out there from people saying, oh, you lost your trade, I win all my trades. That's bullcrap. A lot of people lose trades, and that's okay because when you lose a trade on its face, that doesn't mean you lose a trade over a longer period of time. It takes a lot to understand how to trade. So one area of this is a tier-based trading. So what is it? Now, I just took a screenshot from Keep Trade Kai. We have our own rankings here, but I'm not giving those out for free. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea. So you'll see every wide receiver here is tier 11, right? So remember, tiers are subjective. You can build your own. We have the ones we have. Keep Trade Cut, Fantasy Calcasm. There's plenty out there if you don't want to do it for free, right? Or if you don't want to pay for things. But the idea here is that let's say you see Jalen McMillan, right? Jalen McMillan's down there, wide receiver 32, and you think he's undervalued. why you think Jalen Waddle is overpriced. But they're technically in that same tier. They're tier 11, right? So maybe if you want to tier down, let's say you have Waddle on your roster, you believe in Jalen McMillan, you think Godwin's going to move, you say, hey, he had a great end of the year. If I can tier down to McMillan, if that's my guy, right? Not saying you to do it, I'm just giving you an example, and get a first back, that's okay with me, right? If you could trade within tiers but flip assets and get first or second backs, that's the idea, right? Or the other way to look at tier-based trading, you could always tier up, right? So let's say you have two solid assets in this group. Let's say you have Xavier Worthy and DJ Moore, and you're looking at that, and you're like, hey, I want to get into tier 10, 9, 8, above, wherever those tiers are above them. Then essentially you're trading two dimes, like, right? You're trying to get those strategy there to get and move up. Go get a quarter, right? Two dimes for a quarter. Go up there, grab those things, and kind of and get a legitimate asset, right? Consolidate your roster strength and then target rebuilding teams that look to get off their veterans that we've talked about. That's a way to do it. But at its core, what tier-based focused trading is finding inefficiencies in player evaluations, right? Maybe you like a guy more and trusting your gut, right? Maybe a guy like DJ Moore. Brandon Ayuk could be a great buy right now, wide receiver 29. He looks like he's still going to be the wide receiver one in San Francisco. And Debo's not getting younger. Kittle's not getting younger. Joao Jennings is fine, right? But if you're looking at this and saying, man, there's really an inefficiency here, maybe there's someone up in tier 10 that I don't necessarily want on my roster anymore, I can pivot all the way down to IU, can get a future first, maybe another first, maybe a 27 first that we just talked about, the 27. And then you have that flexibility in assets. So tier-focused trading is a very, 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 very solid strategy out there. If you're struggling with trades and how to identify value, just to help you kind of look at it. Looking at tiers, can I elect an asset based on moving down or up in that? Okay, I can do that. Next one. Don't chase potential, focus on production, right? One of the biggest traps out there for dynasty managers is obsessing over youth and trying to get the youngest roster in the league, right? So having young players is awesome. It's exciting, but it doesn't always equal success. And then you're always trying to get the hit rate on these guys that are not sustainable. And then the potential leaves you just losing to a veteran team out there. So it's about winning. So young does not always mean good. Now, there's also a caveat. Neighbors, those guys, they're amazing, right? We love those guys. But building through youth is not always the end-all, be-all. You can be flexible, right? So I liked having kind of a mixture of it because injuries, role changes, coaching changes, it's hard to build a consistent winner with solely on youth. So make sure you're not going to always hit the hit rates. Have a healthy balance, right? So really try to maintain a young players with upside, some dependable veterans with a solid floor that you can do. Also, hey, look to tier up with young assets, right? So a guy like Marvin Mims is always talked about. Kyle Pitts was like that for years before finally I think the market's kind of come around to what he is as a player. So tier up to more reliable, kind of proven assets, right? Those are the guys you go to do. Another guy that's getting a ton of buzz as being a sell right now is Bucky Irving. And whether you think he is or not, like he's valued pretty high, right? Some have him as a top 5 running back right now. Maybe you're like, hey, I don't know. Liam Cohen's gone. What is that offense going to look like? Rashad White is still there. Maybe I can legitimately move him for maybe a wide receiver. Maybe you're looking at it, you have a couple running backs, and you can go get tier up into like an elite wide receiver status. Maybe you try to do that, right? That's how you kind of build through it. So you don't just focus on the youth the whole time. You look to tier up with young assets as well. If you want to keep a guy like Bucky, that's fine. But trying to navigate those value peaks for young guys. And remember, always go back to, and this is one other strategy too, it maintains this principle, is look for the guys that are really like, let's say you're on the clock, you drafted like Xavier Worthy. Let's just use him as an example. So Xavier Worthy you had, but some guy was trying to trade up for him. You know he was trying to trade up. He offered you multiple trades. He loves Xavier Worthy. That love ain't going away, baby. Like it's going to stay there in the league, right? Now that he's having a good kind of the playoffs down the stretch, he's looked good. If he has a great Super Bowl, he's still going to love Xavier Worthy. And then you can look at it this offseason and be like, man, I'm going to flip to this guy for Xavier Worthy because I know he's going to pay up. That's why knowing your league mates is important. That's a very solid principle to use as you're trying to kind of build a strong roster with some young pieces too. Now, the last two here, very simple. Play in 2-year windows, right? Look to win in 1 and 2-year windows. Really, Dynasty is redraft plus. That's what it is. Okay, that's how it looks. Most leagues, Some leagues fold after 2 or 3 years. You don't have time to build out a 5 to 10 year dynasty. You just don't. Okay. So look at it from a perspective of I'm going to build a dynasty team that's going to contend year one, maybe productive struggle year one where I'm still pushing and contending, but I have some pieces that I like that I can be ready to go for year two. And in year 2, 3, you should be a championship contender. That's how you should look at your roster and really go after it in those first 2 years, right? Calculate, make the right moves, and just remember, maximize your opportunities to win now. Stop being just a donation fund for your league fees, right? Contend as soon as you get into that league. And then the last thing I want to talk about, and it's actually kind of the most important, so I hope you stuck around for this. You need to leverage startup ADP to plan off-season moves. I think it's kind of an underrated way to look at player values. You can go to rankings, and that's fine, but people that rank, they're not drafting for money, right? What you need to do is look at what are these guys getting drafted as. Now, the best website out there for this is Dynasty Data Lab. You go to Dynasty Data Lab. I'm going to show you an example here in a minute of this, and it shows you right now it has startup data with the picks in place. So you can see where 101, 102, and all the way to the 4th round are getting drafted. Well, why is that important? Well, when you monitor startup ADP, that's going to give you a real life analyst, right? You're going to be able to analyze data from trade values now. Like you're going to see, okay, what is the 101 going around? Okay, it's around this pick here. That gives you an idea of what people are willing to draft, where they're willing to draft this with real money, right? We're talking about real money put in these leagues that they're drafting with. It's not just some rankings that people put up in an algorithm. You know, that crap can be manipulated tons of different ways. That's why Keep Trade Cut, a lot of these places get a bad rap is because, well, they're just rankings and they fluctuate so much. Well, if you really want to go into dynasty data, and look, okay, people are spending real hard money on these leagues. Where are they drafting these, right? It gives you a true market analysis. So show you this example of this. So this is kind of the ADP startup to January 26th. So basically the last month, right? From December to January. So what you're going to notice here, it's going to show you where the picks are getting, right? 101 is getting drafted around Marvin Harrison Jr. and Nico Collins. 102 is getting drafted around Jonathan Taylor, Bucky Irving, and Kyler Murray in that range, right? So what this will give you is idea of like, okay, where are rookie picks going? But also where are the running back clusters, right? And then if you're in a startup, obviously this is great because it's going to show you kind of who you can expect to be around what pick. But also like, hey, where are the running back clusters? You know, where are they getting valued as comparable? Okay, I can also use tiers, right? Hey, JSN, you know, he's getting valued as a wide receiver 13 right now. Maybe I think he should be a little lower than that. Okay, who can I tier down to? Could I get a Rome Odunze plus a first? So this is the ways to kind of look at it. Using startup ADP, understanding the markets is very, very important. I think it's one of the best strategies you can use out there. And I don't think a lot of people do it. I think people just look at rankings and they're like, hey, yep, this guy's ranked this way. This is who I'm going to draft. Where to me, startup ADP helps you stay ahead of the curve, identifying trends, pinpointing trade targets, assessing the strengths and weaknesses of your roster too, based on ADP and value. It'll help you understand value. Dynasty Daddy will help you do that, and this will help you do that to understand where your league is at, right? So really, final thoughts here on these principles. You know, building a successful dynasty, it requires strategy. You have to be able to adapt though, right? So when you're looking at your roster, adapt as player shifts go. Commitment to understanding your league's dynamics. Always understand where your leagues are. Is it point per carry? Is it PPR? Underrated. Actually read the bylaws of the leagues that you join, right? Maximize competitive windows. Trade within tiers, understanding that where it comes from. Leveraging tools like I told you, ADP, also Dynasty Daddy, those type of things. And remember, don't worry about if it looks sexy on paper. All you needed to do is score you points. Maintain that flexibility with your picks. Get some veterans in there that can score you points. Look at expected fantasy points from the previous year, and you can kind of dial in some values there, like a Kamara, those type of guys, and then go create a dynasty. Really retool. Be active on the trade market. Those are the ways to win your leagues, right? And so, as always, appreciate you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button. Drop any comments you want in the below. You know, trade questions, strategy questions. I love it all. If you play Devy, drop some Devy questions down there. I'm always here to help you guys. So appreciate you guys. I'll check you guys in the next one.